Okay, so thank you very much again for allowing me to present to you guys. The rabbi has actually done a great job of covering a wide breadth of topics today, especially in terms of fertility and how we go about, identifying and the myriad of treatments that he went through fairly quickly. I always say the most important thing is ask the rabbi. I work very closely with Rabbi Jacobowitz, with Chaim, Bonei Olam, but mainly from the Hasidic or Orthodox community in Williamsburg and Borough Park. Oh, thank you. So basically, I've worked very closely with Rabbi Jacobowitz and with Chaim and Bonei Olam from the Orthodox community in Williamsburg and Borough Park. So it'd be really great to have an opportunity to work with Rabbi, or I should say Dr. Rabbi Segelman, and to help the community in Queens. I must admit that it's very refreshing to hear a rabbi that's more progressive and understand that there is modern technology and not to interpret the law so strictly sometimes where we are not allowed to do this, we're not allowed to do that because the law says we're not to do this. But I think sometimes that ignores the advancement of technology, and we do have a lot of technology. So I'm just go very briefly because I think the rabbi did a great job of emphasizing what some of the things that in Orthodox or a rabbinical community or a shul like he has will suffer. Mainly, how is it that we can get to the mikvah and make sure the ovulation happens after the mikvah. I think that's very, very important. That's something that I must admit is probably one of the biggest problems I see. How can we extend a patient's window of fertility so that they can make it to the mikvah? Okay, so just going to go briefly. So the rabbi already said infertility is after 12 months of intercourse. In women under the age of 35, but in women that are older, we try not to waste too much time. So most of us would agree that after 6 months of unprotected intercourse, that would be the cause of seeking help. Again, talking to the rabbi. Most of the time, we say, again, like the rabbi said, about, anyway, basically it's 35% of the problem tends to be male, and 50% is female, and a combination of about 15%. We anticipate that 90% of women or couples will conceive after 12 months of intercourse. So it's not 100%, but it's close to it. All right, let's see. So I think the rabbi had pointed to, this is an older slide, but it's very typical of what we see. And that there is definitely an inflection point around age 35, and around age 40, and after the age of 41, 42, the incidence of successful pregnancy is actually very low, even with in vitro fertilization. So my biggest point when I talk to couples is that try as quickly as possible and not to wait. So my couples are not only from the Jewish community, from more of the I call it the United Nations of patients that we see in the Queens here. And oftentimes we see that it's a dual income family, the wife is working, and there's a tendency to put off childbearing for economic purposes and also for the professional growth of the woman's career. So that tends to put off childbearing until into the 30s. Whereas what I see that in the Orthodox community, where couples are paired up, and they tend to, start trying at age 18, 19, or 20, this age factor is not as big of a problem for at least the initial child. What I do see is that in the more Orthodox community, they see a family as 7 or more. So then I see those couples come and see me when they're stuck on like the 5 or 6, and they want that 7th baby. The rabbi kind of talked about this, this basically in lay terms about what this diagram shows. So basically, women will menstruate, and then the egg will start maturing, and then ovulation will occur. And that during this period of time, the lining of the uterus will grow. So we, in the Orthodox community, and in women who observe and go to mikvah, we kind of don't want to have this disturbed. And so we want to kind of have this 5 and 7, so 5 days of bleeding, and then 7 days of no bleeding. And so how can we achieve this? We have the technology to do that. So we have ultrasound, we have blood tests that we can draw, and then we have medications like Clomid, now we have Femara, I think the rabbi touched about that. Plus also adding simple medications like estrogen in the beginning portion of the menstrual cycle to kind of delay or the ovulation. And also we can do things at the end of the cycle to kind of lengthen the period or shorten the period. All right? That's helpful as well. So, what I want to kind of stop here for a second, and what we find is that in this modern world we live in, and depending on which community we serve, and if we're allowed to use the internet or not. So in the more Orthodox community, they're advised not to use the internet. I don't know how your community works. If you're allowed to use the internet, pretty much, does everybody have a cell phone in this room? What kind of cell phone do you have, Rabbi?
Putting me on the spot, that's a personal question that I, no.
Is it
I have an
Apple?
iPhone, I have an iPhone.
iPhone, okay. So everybody's phone, has anybody downloaded any app? Right?
Sure.
So right now, Guilty, okay. So fertility apps are very, very common right now, and they're free. So if you go on the App Store and you were to download, or just put in a search term, it says fertility app or fertility tracker, fertility trackers that are free to come up. So we performed a study looking at how many of these fertility apps are actually very accurate. And then we also try to look at how much of these apps are actually being downloaded. Amazing enough, about 50 million downloads of these fertility apps are performed on an annual basis. That's actually more than just about any textbook that I know of that's been published. And none of these apps are actually what we call verified or vetted out. So they claim to be the best app, but there is no verification. There's no, as we can say, certification process that they're kosher, right? So very interesting, when we did our research, and I'll show you a little bit of the research, we found that of the 50 fertility apps and websites we studied, only 3 of them were actually accurate. Yeah. And since the publication is very interesting, we found that the fertility apps started changing their algorithms and matching more of what has been published in literature. All right, so I'm going to ask the questions. The rabbi asked for how many days in a month is a woman fertile? How many days are actually what we call the fertile window? So I'm going to go around the room and put everybody on the spot. I won't ask the rabbi. So how many days is a woman fertile in a month?
I'd say 3.
3? You don't know? Do you have any kids? Yes. You have to say an answer. I'm kicking it. So 3? 5? 7? 6 or 7, very good. Next. 5? 3?
I'm just guessing. Maybe 10.
10? 6 or 7? 5? So, all right. So in this room, as you can see, we have a very diverse guesses or ideas of how many fertile days there are. All right, so that's question number 1. Question number 2. How often should a couple have sex in order to achieve the maximal success rate? Every other day or every day?
It was never up to me.
Very good. How about you? Every day or every other day? Every other day. Every other day?
That's it.
Every other, no, okay. Every day. Every day?
Twice a day.
Every day. Every day, every day. Every other, okay, very good. So, I'm going to run a, so basically we presented a paper And an organization picked up on this paper and decided to make a video for us. So I can get it out. So let me see if I can run it.
I mean, we can use the photos of hotspot, we have to.
I think it ran before. I mean, let's see if I can get it to run. It ran before, so let's see if it does it.
They only got one part. It's fireworks.
So you said we can use your phone as hotspot?
I'm going to the second.
Thank you very much. So basically, would you believe I tell you the actual fertile window is 6 days? Okay, it's 6 days. Not 5, not 4, not 7, not 10, but 6 days. What the rabbi said is for the most part correct. But for the fertile window, we do recommend having sex every day. And a day after ovulation is still considered a fertile day. Because most of the people consider the day of ovulation as the LH surge, but that's not really a day of ovulation. LH surge predicts in 24 to 36 hours later the ovulation will occur. All right, so we're going to try to see if I can run the video. And so it's 6 days, 6 days during the fertile window, and then also it's every day. So according to the study done in Harvard, if you miss the day, so if you do every other day, which is a very common myth that's propagated by somewhere on the internet, somebody said, oh, I read on the internet, you should do it every other day. So if you do it every other day, you're missing half to 50% of the fertile window. And so we try to encourage couples to have sex every day. And usually a rabbi agrees with that. So, that every day is good. For the semen analysis, you're supposed to save up for 3 days, but not more than 10. That's different. So there's a standard way of measuring the sperm count. And what was diluting. So another thing is that we found is that the apps are now being used in a reverse way. Oh, thank you.
I didn't.
Perfect. Thank you. Can you just extend that?
I have a key with it.
Couples trying to conceive use a variety of tools to help time intercourse. One such tool that has emerged in the last decade is websites and couples trying to conceive use a variety of
Wait,
windows
stop
to
for a
integrate
minute.
with the
Stop it?
user's
Yeah,
life.
stop
Such
for 1
tool
second.
has emerged in the last decade is websites and cell phone apps offered to predict a fertile window by using the date of the user's last menstrual period or the length of her menstrual cycle. The fertile window constitutes the days of the menstrual cycle.
So what we find is that couples are now using the apps in a different way than we initially predicted they were using. They're using the apps to try not to get pregnant. So what they would do is they say, well, if these are the 6 fertile days, what if we avoid having sex those days? And then we can not get pregnant. But because most of these apps are not validated,
Right.
so a lot of women that were using, couples that are using the app solely as a way of preventing pregnancy fail.
Does that have to get the rhythm cycle? I guess would be the 6 days.
I think rhythm cycle tends to be with the rhythm plus withdrawal. So then they would see what the fertile days may be, and then the withdrawal on those days that they're supposed to be fertile. But we know that the pre-cum, the pre-ejaculate, there's about 2 million sperm. And we also know that
500 million patients with fertility websites. This study found websites by comparabilities are often unreliable on the fertile window of a standard 28-day menstrual cycle. They found that only 1 of 20 websites and 3 of 33 unique apps predicted the precise fertile
I'll start
window.
again. Sure.
Nearly
it's a short video.
Okay.
Couples trying to conceive use a variety of tools to help time intercourse. One such tool that has emerged in the last decade is websites and cell phone apps offering to predict a fertile window by using the date of the user's last menstrual period and the length of her menstrual cycle. The fertile window constitutes the days of the menstrual cycle during which intercourse may lead to fertilization. But how accurate are these predictions? Researchers at the Weill Cornell Medical College and New York Presbyterian Hospital tried to find out the accuracy of the top 20 free fertility websites, Android apps, and iOS apps by comparing their predicted windows with the actual fertile window of a standard 28-day menstrual cycle. They found that only 1 of 20 websites and 3 of 33 unique apps predicted the precise fertile window. Nearly 25% of the predicted fertile days were outside of the actual fertility window. The range of predicted fertile windows included days up to 5 cycle days before the start of the fertile window and up to 6 days after ovulation, with considerable variability among the websites and apps. In fact, the accuracy of one of them was as low as 8%. Apps and websites are widely used by the general public to help couples trying to conceive by predicting the fertile window. As per some estimates, more than 500 million patients are currently using such resources. This study's findings indicate that these modalities are often unreliable in predicting a precise fertile window. Practitioners should be informed and patients should be counseled about the inaccuracy of these modalities.
Good, thank you. So again, in terms of the modern technology, as we advance, we have things that can very help us, but also what we
You
find
go
is
back
that
to your PowerPoint?
that's fine. But we also find that most of the stuff that you find on the internet is just not validated. So I always say be careful what you read and believe, and also always ask the rabbi. I think rabbi's sources are the most accurate. In my experience, the rabbi works with the medical community very well, and honestly, the only difference between rabbi and us is the MD. They don't have an MD, that's about it. Otherwise, they pretty much prescribe and tell me what to do, and I just follow along. The rabbi had touched upon certain things, and I'll tell you how we, I don't want to say get around it, and we realize we utilize the rabbi to tell us what the law says, and we don't interpret law. So for instance, for the semen analysis, what we do is we ask the couple to have sex around the time of when ovulation is during the fertile window, and just come in for what we call PCT, post-coital test. So they'll have sex, they'll come in, I'll examine the woman, use a speculum, and take a little bit of sample from the, we call cervical mucus, and to count the sperm there. And this way we're not wasting the seeds. Again, this is one way. And we're looking for 8 sperm per high valve field. Sometimes they're dead, but at least we're trying to look for 8 sperm per high valve field. Then after that information is gotten, then we ask the rabbi, can we go further if we don't find any sperm? As the rabbi said, sometimes it's more of a functional problem. They're not doing it the right way. So we'll send the couple to the rabbi for some education to make sure there is actually there's orgasm into the woman. Sometimes that doesn't happen. After that, the rabbi sends them back. We'll repeat the PCT again. And oftentimes you'll be surprised. The couple doesn't quite know how to do it and did not have an orgasm. So it's a serious, and then it leads to a lot of anxiety. So we try to get rid of that anxiety by going through the rabbi, making sure we follow the law. The rabbi can sometimes say, well, maybe we need to do a formal semen analysis. What we do is ask the rabbi for permission, and we use a condom and then we prick a hole into the condom. So the couple still has sex, the sperm does still come out, and then we ask the condom, and we'll have the couple follow the condom, and then we take a little drop and put it on the microscope, do a formal semen analysis, and then the rest of the sperm we put it back into the vagina. So we're not losing or wasting any of the seeds. We also say that, I don't want to say in a negative way, but pretty much the rabbis usually tell us we can do just about anything we want to the poor woman. So we can draw the blood, send a woman for a tube test, which is known as the God darn awful test because it's very painful. We're allowed to do a sonogram, which is also very uncomfortable. And we're allowed to do just about anything we want to the women, but we just about cannot do anything to the man. It's kind of very unfair. But again, this is the for the privilege of serving the community, I always say we have to follow the law, and it's whatever the rabbi tells us the law is. It's very interesting,
So I'll
again,
point out that not everyone agrees to the rabbinic laws that the doctor is presenting. Not everyone agrees. That is one school of thought about the semen analysis, but there are other opinions. And,
that's why I think it's very refreshing to be able to have a conversation with Rabbi Sigelman, and that, again, the world has advanced. What we understand of nature is a lot different than when the Torah was written. And so I think I don't want to use the wrong word, for educated rabbis to help couples, I think is so important, and to utilize the best we can the technology we have, rather than having, unfortunately, these myths that you can see that's propagated on the internet steering the couple. I think is very, very important. Does anybody have any questions?